Little boy gives a secret signal to his dog. Judge stops the courtroom, in shock. The courtroom was silent enough to hear the ticking clock above the judge's head. Rows of polished oak benches were filled with stiff postures and whispered gossip, but all eyes were drawn to the small figure at the front, a 6-year-old boy in a faded red tank top, swinging his legs nervously from a leather chair that seemed far too big for him. His name was Noah, pale, quiet, and guarded. His brown hair curled slightly above his ears, and his fingers trembled just enough for the court reporter to notice. But beside him, sitting tall and alert, was a German shepherd wearing a service vest with the word Ruger etched into a brass tag. Ruger wasn't just any dog. He had been assigned to Noah when the boy was barely 3. After being found wandering the street alone, dirty and mute, Noah had been placed in a trauma recovery program where Ruger was introduced as his therapy dog. No one could explain it, but from day one, the boy and the dog had bonded in a way no professional ever expected. Ruger understood Noah's moods before he did. He barked when Noah froze. He whimpered when Noah was afraid. He knew instinctively when Noah remembered things that scared him. Now they were in court. Again, this time to determine whether Noah should be returned to his most recent foster home with Gregory Leach, a man with a clean background but a gut feeling no one could explain. Judge Camden looked down at Noah. Her tone was gentle, motherly even. "Sweetheart, can you tell me your name?" Noah said nothing. He glanced at Ruger. The room held its breath. Ruger's ears perked up. Then Noah did something no one expected. He shifted forward, gently brushed his hand down Ruger's side, then tapped twice near the rib cage. Then he moved his fingers in a small, slow circle. The handler standing in the back went rigid. That was a code, a silent trauma cue that had been built into Ruger's training from the beginning. Suddenly, Ruger stood, placed one paw on Noah's knee, and then turned to face the back of the room, eyes locked directly onto Gregory Leach. And then he barked loud once, then again. Judge Camden frowned. "What's happening?" The psychologist present stood immediately. "Your Honor, that's the alert signal. The child is identifying a perceived abuser using nonverbal trauma communication." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Gregory stood abruptly. "This is insane. It's just a trick." But Ruger barked again, lower, firmer, and growled. Noah finally spoke. A whisper, a tremor, but his voice was clear. "He used to lock me in the closet." Silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy. Judge Camden's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her gavel. "This court is now in recess. Bailiff, please escort Mr. Leach to the holding room for questioning, immediately." Gregory tried to protest, but security stepped in. Ruger didn't move. He simply pressed against Noah's leg. Calm now. Steady. Noah wasn't shaking anymore. He looked up at the judge and said, "Ruger remembered." So I remembered too. Everyone in the courtroom was stunned. It wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't manipulation. It was truth. Honest, raw, impossible to fake. Judge Camden stared at the boy. "Noah, would you be okay staying somewhere safe tonight?" He nodded. "And would you like Ruger to stay with you?" He reached out and hugged the dog's neck tightly. "Forever." The psychologist leaned close to the judge, whispering, "Noah never spoke about that man. Not once. But the signal, the dog doesn't react unless the command is exact. There's no way he could have just guessed it." The judge looked down at the case file, filled with clean reports, smiling home visit photos, lies. And then she looked at the boy, Noah, the boy who barely spoke, who trusted no one except Ruger. And what he had just revealed was only the beginning. The courtroom reopened the following morning under a cloud of anticipation. Everyone had heard what happened the day before. The dog, the bark, the whispered confession. Whispers had spread through the hallways like wildfire. But today, the energy was different. Judge Camden entered, her expression unreadable. She glanced toward the table where Noah sat, this time calmer, nestled close to Ruger, whose steady presence seemed to anchor the small boy's entire world. At the opposite end of the room sat Gregory Leach, now flanked by a defense attorney and visibly agitated. Gone was the confident facade. His hands fidgeted, his collar tugged, his eyes darted to the boy and the dog again and again. "Before we begin," the judge said, "I'd like to acknowledge what happened yesterday." She turned to the psychologist, Dr. Lively, who rose from her seat with a folder in hand. "We've reviewed Ruger's response and cross-referenced it with Noah's trauma therapy history," Dr. Lively began. "The signal he used, three-part sequence, tap, pause, circle, is a trained indicator for identifying unsafe persons without verbalization. It was developed specifically for children too young or traumatized to speak about abuse." Judge Camden nodded slowly. "Was this signal disclosed to Mr. Leach or anyone in his household?" "No, Your Honor. It's restricted to medical records and only accessible by certified trauma professionals. The likelihood of Noah reproducing that signal by accident is statistically negligible." A quiet gasp came from someone in the gallery. Then the judge looked to the new witness, seated at the side of the courtroom. A young woman in plain clothes. Her eyes were red, makeup smudged. She looked down as her name was called. "Miss Jenna Miles," the judge said, "you've submitted a voluntary statement regarding Mr. Leach's behavior?" Jenna nodded. "I used to date him, lived with him for about 6 months. He was charming in public, but behind closed doors—" Her voice cracked. "He had a temper, especially when it came to children." Gasps rippled again. Gregory's lawyer objected, but was overruled. Jenna's hands shook as she continued. "I saw him grab Noah once, hard, threw his toy and screamed in his face. He told me to mind my business. I left 2 weeks later, and I've been carrying guilt ever since." Gregory slammed his hand on the table. "She's lying. This is all a setup." But the judge was already leaning forward. "Bailiff, please remove Mr. Leach from the courtroom." Gregory was escorted out, his voice still echoing as he was taken away. The courtroom fell into a long, heavy silence. Judge Camden looked toward Noah. "I owe you an apology," she said gently. "You should never have had to prove what happened to you, but I want you to know we believe you, and we believe Ruger, too." Noah blinked, then whispered, "Thank you." Later that afternoon, as the official decision was read aloud, the judge granted emergency removal of custody rights from Mr. Leach. Noah would be placed in a permanent, trauma-informed foster placement, with Ruger by his side for life. But that wasn't all. In an unprecedented move, Judge Camden requested a formal hearing to designate Ruger not just as a therapy animal, but as Noah's legal guardian companion, ensuring no system or institution could ever separate them. Cheers broke out quietly in the courtroom. Even the stenographer wiped a tear. Noah turned to Ruger and gave him a hug, pressing his cheek against the dog's fur. "You kept me safe," he whispered, "like you promised." Outside the courthouse, reporters waited, but Noah didn't look at the cameras. He just held Ruger's leash, walking down the steps with his new caseworker, who smiled down at him and said, "You're one brave boy." Noah didn't answer. He didn't have to, because for the first time in a very long time, he didn't feel scared. He felt free. And as they walked away, Noah and the dog who had remembered what he couldn't, the judge watched from her chambers and whispered to herself, "Sometimes the best testimony doesn't come from a person, but from the one who never stopped protecting him."